Learning a new killer in Dead by Daylight is always a challenge, but the Unknown is in a league of his own. The Unknown has one of the weirdest, most unpredictable powers in the game, and honestly, it doesn't take much for survivors to completely counter your main ability. So to figure out how to actually win with him, I tracked down UnladenCrow. He's a P100 Unknown main who has spent hundreds of hours discovering new shots and techs that nobody's even heard of. He knows the Unknown better than almost anyone, but when we sat down to talk, he told me something completely crazy.
You know, if I was suddenly thrown into a tournament, I'd much rather pull out somebody like Huntress, Ghoul, even Nemesis these days after all the buffs he's got. I'd rather pull out Nemesis than I'd rather pull out Unknown into like a super competitive environment.
He wouldn't even pick his own main. He wouldn't play Unknown. And why is that? Because this killer is incredibly unforgiving. Miss a couple shots and your momentum vanishes and the game basically becomes unwinnable. And that got me thinking, if the guy who literally wrote the playbook on this killer admits that the Unknown is tough, how would an average Joe like me learn him without grinding for hundreds and hundreds of hours? So what I did is I had UnladenCrow coach me every single day for 5 days straight. I'm going to be taking you along that exact journey day by day, breaking down his power, the strongest builds, his best add-ons, and the secret techniques that you actually need to win games. Stick around to learn the absolute best way to play the Unknown and see what happens when I finally put all 5 days of training to the ultimate test. Day 1 started with Crow explaining the basics of the Unknown's power, and I quickly realized how mentally exhausting this killer is. I streamed this entire 5-day journey live on Twitch, and my chat kept on asking me why I was being so quiet. The honest answer is I couldn't even look over at my second monitor. I had to be 100% locked in at all times. And that's because of how the Unknown's main power actually works. His main power is a bouncing projectile called the UVX, but you can't just hit survivors with it to do damage.
You need to break the habit of trying to just always direct impact survivors. You need to be thinking about different ways and how all the indirect ways you can hit the survivor, because those are typically going to be a lot easier to get off depending on the map.
You have to hit a wall or a floor near them so they get caught in the blast radius to apply a status effect called weakened. And then once they're weakened and you hit them a second time, it actually takes a health state. But here's the catch that makes reading Twitch chat impossible. Survivors can cure their weakened state simply by staring directly at you. And UnladenCrow taught me that getting out of the weakened state is heavily skewed in the survivor's favor. They don't have to moonwalk perfectly, staring you in the eye the entire time. They can simply flick their camera back towards you and then back forward. But the UVX is only half of his kit. The other half is actually pretty strong, his Hallucinations. The Unknown probably has the best teleport in the entire game. It's instant, it's abrupt. You can use it mid-chase at a loop to cut off a survivor, or you could use it to jump across the map to check out a generator. But there is a little bit of a catch. You can't actually choose where you place your Hallucinations. As you walk around, the game periodically drops them up to a maximum of 4. You can only teleport to where the Hallucinations happen to land. There is a secret way where you can force the Hallucinations to where you want, but we saved that technique for day 4. Survivors can walk up and dispel these Hallucinations to get rid of them, but Crow taught me you can use them for information.
They have to spend about 4 seconds to get rid of that hallucination. And while they're doing that, not only are they putting themselves at risk, but after they cleanse that hallucination, any Unknown main who's even like somewhat paying attention will realize that that hallucination that was by that gen was gone. It's a base kit surveillance or discordance in a way where it tells you that they're working on that generator again.
And here's the craziest detail that Crow pointed out. When a survivor is actively dispelling a hallucination, if you look at its aura through the wall, it twitches ever so slightly. So if you see it twitching, you can instantly teleport and you'll catch a survivor off guard. So on day 1, I was trying to manage bouncing geometry, watch for staring survivors, monitor the 4 hallucinations to see if they're twitching, and learn map mobility all at the same time. It was so overwhelming, I basically stopped using the UVX power altogether. I just was relying on my M1 attacks and teleporting because I was terrified of missing my shots. But I knew that was just a crutch. If I wanted to master him, I had to struggle through the learning curve. So by the end of day 1, I completely stopped worrying about winning and losing. All I focused on was hitting my shots. Once I stopped stressing over the win column and got the muscle memory down, it was time to actually start securing wins. Which brings us to day 2, the builds. Going into day 2, I was hoping UnladenCrow would just hand me some magical build that completely fixed my day 1 struggles. But here's the tough reality about the unknown.
You know, most killers, they'll have maybe 1 to 3 hard meta builds, and then maybe another like 20 off meta perks that you use in certain scenarios. With Unknown, every Unknown main you go to is going to give you a different best build. It depends purely on how that individual person plays. There are different preferences on things like kicking generators, slugging, etc., etc.
So I did not know this, but the Unknown is actually one of the quietest killers in the game. And because he's so quiet, Crow recommended that I use the Unknown perk Unforeseen.
Unforeseen is the first one. It's a teachable from Unknown, and it pairs beautifully. Unknown's footsteps are incredibly quiet, one of the quietest of any killers in the game. They also make very little noise while vaulting windows, while falling, and just in general, outside of them either molting, dropping a hallucination, or doing their voice line. So it's a little bit RNG if you can get the sneak off, but Undetectable is such just a strong status on Unknown because of that, because of how quiet Unknown naturally is.
And since I was already kicking so many generators to trigger that stealth, I realized I could throw in perks like Call of Brine or Pop Goes the Weasel to get some massive gen regression. UnladenCrow also taught me an even crazier trick using Nowhere to Hide and Lethal Pursuer. Normally, Nowhere to Hide just shows you the aura of survivors immediately around the area that you kick a generator, but with Unknown, if you kick a generator and then instantly teleport to a hallucination across the map, the game essentially stretches the aura reading radius along your entire teleportation path. You basically get to see every survivor on the map for a few seconds, which is insanely powerful. And if kicking's not your style, I also had a ton of fun running Friends Till the End paired with Lethal Pursuer. It exposes your obsession and shows you their aura, and with your teleport being so fast, you can just instantly jump to them for a quick down. All those builds were fun, but I was still struggling to secure consistent wins. I need something that hit a little bit harder, and that's when UnladenCrow gave me the Snowball build. If you want to win, and you don't care about survivors being angry in the endgame chat, this is the build you run. Lethal Pursuer, Infectious Fright, Monitor and Abuse, and Nurse's Calling. Once you get an early down, Infectious Fright makes everyone else scream, and you just start the chain reaction that completely overwhelms them. But honestly, this build only works because of one very specific piece of the puzzle. It requires an iridescent add-on that completely breaks the early game to get the snowball rolling, which was the perfect realization that led me right into day number 3, the add-ons. Day 3 was all about the add-ons, and let's start by talking about the insanely powerful add-on used in the Snowball build. It's an iridescent add-on called Captured by the Dark, and it makes every single survivor in the game weakened at the start of the trial. It's objectively the Unknown's strongest add-on, and honestly, it feels a little bit cheap, especially when you pair it up with B-Movie Poster, which makes survivors broken after you damage them with a UVX. It's a super nasty combo if you want to win, but relying on it wasn't actually helping me learn the killer's mechanics. So I swapped to an add-on that is way more forgiving for a beginner, the Notebook of Theories.
This is a really simple add-on, which increases how long a survivor is hindered after a direct impact, and a direct impacting them typically only hinders them for a few seconds. And Notebook of Theory increases how long they're hindered. I think it says right here on the wiki, it says by +2 seconds. I should have looked that up beforehand, but that's what the wiki says. Another one I'd recommend is Hypnotist Watch. This is very similar to Notebook of Theories, where when you direct impact, it applies an effect, but instead of hindered, it applies exhausted.
But I'll be honest with you, in my 5 days, I wasn't able to get a ton of value out of it. If you're further along in your Unknown journey, absolutely run it. But my brain was completely occupied by a different add-on. Milk, specifically the discarded milk carton add-on, is an add-on that makes your UVX substantially bouncier. But here's the catch: if you equipped milk, you have to completely pledge yourself to the cult of milk. You cannot take it off.
The first one that's the easiest to comprehend is it speeds up your bounce slightly. So after you bounce, if you're running milk carton, because the bounce is stronger, it'll get to its endpoint a little bit faster if you're directly comparing it to a bounce without milk. And the final thing of milk, this is all it reduces the friction action of the orb. Probably the hardest to wrap your head around in terms of what it does, but the short is it changes how the orb interacts with pretty much every collision in the game.
It's honestly a little bit annoying that joining the cult basically permanently locks up one of your 2 add-on slots, but if you commit to it, your shots will be heavily rewarded. I was incredibly thankful that I was in the Cult of Milk when I started hitting clips like this. Pop up, come on! That was something Crow taught me too, the pop up. Oh! Oh! Okay. Ma'am. Shoot that. Oh. By day 4, I finally had a grasp on his power and a build that was securing wins, but now it was time to learn some advanced techniques. First, we have to resolve the biggest issue from day 1. How do you actually control where your hallucinations drop? And that's where UnladenCrow taught me about edging. If you just lightly tap your power button like you're about to pull out your UVX, it temporarily stops the hallucination meter from filling up. So if your meter's almost full, you can just spam tap your power until you walk to the exact spot you want your hallucination to drop. The only catch is tapping it slows down your movement speed, so Crow's rule of thumb is this: if you're more than 5 seconds away from your target drop spot, don't edge, because it's just a complete waste of time. After we were done edging, Crow took me into a custom game for over an hour to show me the true ceiling of this killer. He showed me the turkey tech, where you bounce the UVX off moving objects to make the trajectory completely random and impossible to juke. He showed me crazy orbital shots over tall tiles. And while these were cool to go into games with my friends and my viewers and show them, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I could not pull off any of these in a real match. If you want to know all the advanced techs, you just have to go to UnladenCrow's channel. He made a whole spreadsheet on this kind of stuff.
Because as far as I know, I was the first person to find a whole lot about the unknown, not only from that initial BTB, but also just in general through all the testing I've done and all the, honestly, a lot of it came from just recording B-roll for videos, because I use a lot of different like B-roll and I do a lot of testing because I like to make sure that what I'm saying is correct and it's going to be correct for an extended amount of time, so I do a lot of testing. I'm
unfortunately just not the guy to get that advanced with you, because on this 5-day journey I need to focus on practical techs that I could actually pull off in game. The single most important advanced tech that I learned was the 90-degree tech. Normally the UVX needs to hit 2 surfaces to explode. This is like bouncing off the wall and then hitting the floor. But if you fire directly into a 90-degree angle, like the exact spot where the floor meets the wall, it hits both surfaces almost simultaneously and pops instantly. To force myself to learn the 90-degree tech, Crow had me set up a custom challenge on my stream with my viewers. We loaded into Midwich and they all ran no mither so that they were permanently injured, and my rule was that I had to stay on the bottom floor the entire game. The only time I could go upstairs was to hook somebody. I couldn't M1 anyone, and I could only use the 90-degree tech to injure survivors above me. And after an entire day of doing that challenge, I found myself using the 90-degree tech way more in public matches. The other incredibly practical tip involves stairs. When a survivor is running up a staircase, your instinct might be to try to like bounce it off the wall. Don't do that. Just aim right at the stairs. The UVX will actually skip up the steps alongside the survivor. I ended up getting so many hits by trusting the pop-up tech, and these shots feel incredibly rewarding too. By the end of day 4, my entire mindset had shifted. I wasn't just playing Dead by Daylight anymore, I was playing a geometry simulator. I was finally ready. It was time for day 5, the final test. When day 5 finally arrived, I decided to look back on my day 1 footage, and the difference was insane. Going into this, I thought the unknown was going to be relatively simple. Not saying I didn't think it was going to be difficult, but I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. By day 5, I was still using a massive amount of mental capacity by edging, doing my 90-degree pops, watching my hallucinations to see if they twitched. And a lot of people ask me, Straz, how do you actually know when you've mastered a killer? Do you have to go on some some insane win streak? And honestly, the answer is no. I don't care about win streaks. To me, playing Dead by Daylight and learning a new killer is meant to be fun. And the truth about the Unknown is it doesn't matter how locked in you are. He's so unforgiving that one missed UVX shot or a hallucination getting dispelled at the wrong time can erase all momentum and cost you the entire game. And I experienced that on my final day. I had a match where I did everything right. I was checking my angles, placing my hallucinations where I wanted them, and it still fell apart. And while in the past a game like this may have completely ruined my mood, I remember something UnladenCrow told me when we first started.
Like you said earlier, they're a very hard killer, they're very difficult, but they're also very rewarding once you actually kind of know what you're doing. You can have a horrible game, get stomped, but if you get just one or two really cool shots off, you don't really feel bad about getting stomped because, hey, you hit something, you got a clip. You're not going to remember the game outside of that one clip you hit where it was like, oh, yes.
And that's how I know I finally mastered the Unknown. Not because I was winning every game, but because I stopped stressing about the 4K and started seeing the map as a playground. If you've been avoiding the Unknown because you don't think he's very good, this is your sign to pick him up. Just throw on the Milk Carton add-on, go find some funky looking angles and try to hit some crazy shots. But I would have never have hit any of these shots without a massive amount of help. So first and foremost, a huge thank you to UnladenCrow for taking the time to coach me through this entire journey. If you want to learn every advanced tech for the Unknown, he's the go-to guy. I have his channel linked right at the top of the description and in the pinned comment. So please do me a favor and go show him some love. But the Unknown is just the latest stop on this journey. We've already gone through this exact same mastery process for Sadako, Vecna, Freddy, Trapper, Singularity, Dracula, Demogorgon, Ghostface, Pig, and Springtrap. So if you've enjoyed learning alongside me today, click the playlist that I'm about to put up on screen to see the rest of the mastering series. And if this video helped you out, please hit the subscribe button because it genuinely makes a massive difference. And real quick, before you hit my mastering series playlist, drop a comment down below and let me know who I should master next. I'll see you in the next one.